single dad rescued 19-year-old mom and her twin girls cast out by in-laws, not knowing they'd be his miracle. She was just 19, standing barefoot on sun-scorched pavement, her arms trembling around twin daughters who clung to her like roots to a dying tree. A crowd watched in silence as the family, who once called her their own, disowned her in a public declaration colder than steel. But from the edge of that crowd, a man stepped forward, one with nothing left to give except the kind of heart that refuses to look away. He didn't know her name. He didn't know their story. But he knew one thing: no child deserves to be erased. What came next wasn't part of any plan. But then again, some miracles never are. Studio microphone before we begin. If stories of compassion, healing, and second chances speak to your soul, hit that subscribe button. We create each story with heart, just for you. Now let's begin. The Arizona sun that day was unforgiving. Not just hot, but relentless. The kind of heat that buckled fences and silenced even the gossip on the corners. It pressed down on the town like guilt. Calder Brooks had no intention of staying long. He was just a carpenter making a supply run, delivering cedar beams for the new gazebo outside the Hartley Pavilion. But as he rolled into the gravel lot in his rust-stained Ford and stepped out under the sliver of shade from a dying juniper, the sound of voices stopped him. Too many for a town council meeting. Too hushed. Too charged. He followed the noise out of curiosity. But what he found changed everything. A makeshift stage, folding chairs, a crowd too eager to look away. And on the platform, Martha Hartley, matriarch of the town's wealthiest family, microphone in hand. And beside her, a girl, no older than 19, pale, drenched in sweat, holding two little girls who mirrored her auburn hair in silent, wide-eyed fear. Martha's voice was icy. The Hartley estate formally releases any and all responsibility for Elo and Blake and her children. They will no longer carry the Hartley name. They are no longer our concern. You could have heard a feather drop. No outrage. No applause. Just polite shuffling. Eyes darting. Shame pretending not to be shame. Eloin said nothing. Not a plea. Not a tear. She just held those girls like armor, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the heat. Calder couldn't move. Not at first. He'd seen heartbreak. Seen his wife Jamie slip away from postpartum complications. Watched his daughter Celine, once full of light, fade into the silence of Rett syndrome. But this was something else. This was erasure. And that's when he moved. He stepped forward. No speech. No plan. Just boots crunching gravel, like a heartbeat growing louder. "If you're casting them out," he said, voice low but solid, "I'll take them in." Gasps. A scoff from Martha. "And who are you?" she asked. He didn't blink. A man who remembers what it felt like when his world fell apart. And someone who swore he'd never let anyone else go through that alone. A pause. A flicker. Then, from the shade, another voice. "And I'll make sure they have what they need." The crowd turned. A woman removed her wide-brimmed hat. It was Maris Hartley, Martha's estranged daughter, vanished years ago, now returning with fire in her eyes. She looked at Eloin, then said, "They threw away a family today, but maybe someone else just found one." Calder held out his hand. Eloin didn't speak, but after a breath that seemed to span lifetimes, she placed her trembling hand in his. The ride back to Calder's cabin was silent. Sacred, even. The girls slept curled in the back like cubs. Eloin sat still, hands in her lap, eyes fixed forward like if she looked back, the spell would break. When they arrived, Calder helped her inside. The cabin was small, built by hand, filled with quiet smells, pine, cinnamon, memory. He offered her food. She nodded. He cooked. She ate. Neither of them filled the silence with words that couldn't fix what silence already held gently. She asked nothing of him. He asked nothing of her. Until finally he said, "There's a room upstairs. It's yours if you want it." She looked up. "Why?" He shrugged. Because walking away didn't feel right. That night, he checked on Celine. She lay still in bed, eyes open, watching the shadows on the ceiling like stars she couldn't reach. "You're going to meet someone tomorrow," he whispered. and maybe they'll help you remember who you are. Downstairs, Eloin tucked her daughters into quilts that didn't belong to them yet, but somehow already felt like home. Are we safe? Unia whispered. Eloin didn't hesitate. Yes, baby. I think we finally are. The next morning, Unia and Mirai crept into Celine's space. Calder nearly panicked. No one approached Celine without preparation, but the girls, barefoot and gentle, moved like they'd always known how to navigate silent places. Unia knelt beside Celine. No words, just presence. Mir placed a crayon stub, a pebble, and a watch face on the floor, a strange little offering. Celine's eyes moved, really moved, and then a blink, 3 times. Calder almost dropped his coffee. She doesn't have to talk, Unia said quietly. We speak quiet. That evening, Calder sat on the porch as the sun painted the sky in rust and lavender. Eloin joined him, knees tucked to her chest. She smiled today, he said. She hasn't in years, she replied. Maybe this porch is holy ground, he said. Maybe it always was, she whispered. Days passed, then weeks. The cabin came alive in ways Calder hadn't dared imagine. Celine began to respond. Reach. Blink twice for yes, once for no. And then one day, she laughed. A breathy, broken, beautiful sound that cracked Calder's heart open like a thunderclap. Eloin cried. Unia danced. Mir declared a holiday. Calder just knelt beside his daughter and whispered, You're still in there. You've always been in there. That night, they ate on the floor. No rules, no speeches, just laughter and light. But later, while the fire burned low, Calder whispered to Eloin, What if this is all too fragile? She smiled. Then we hold it together, one breath at a time. A month later, Eloin found herself writing a letter, not to say goodbye, but because she didn't know how to say, I want to stay. She left it on the table, unsealed. Calder found it, read it, then walked outside and said, You don't have to run. I don't know how to stay. Then we learn, together. And so they did. The miracle wasn't in the grand gestures. It was in chalk hearts drawn by trembling hands, in crayon maps to safe places, in chilly nights where ketchup was love and lanterns were hope. Maris came back, too, not just as donor, but family. She brought a communication board for Celine. The first word Celine ever picked? Happy. They built something, the 5 of them. No, 6. Unia, Mirai, Celine, Eloin, Maris, Calder. They built it with second chances, with grief turned into glue, with silence turned into music. Eventually, Celine wrote one word on a card. She handed it not to Calder, but to Eloin. Mama, that night, Calder whispered, It's not a rescue story, is it? No, Eloin said, It's a resurrection. And when the snow finally came, soft and slow, blanketing the cabin in hush, they didn't fear it. They stood at the window, together, watching a new kind of miracle unfold, one made not of fate, but of choice. Studio microphone, if this story moved you, we invite you to leave a comment below. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. We read every one. If you believe in quiet miracles, if second chances matter to you, if love in its rawest, most human form inspires you, like, share, and subscribe. You're part of this light now. Thank you for being here.